Welcome to Americana on Tour. I'm Dan Barth, and today we'll explore the West Buffalo Bill helped to develop.
When I was growing up, I learned a lot by watching my dad. Dad was a State Farm agent for 25 years, and I've become a State Farm agent too. Being there for others is a tremendous responsibility. I take a lot of pride in doing the proper job for other people, like every State Farm agent. People tell me I'm just like my dad. That's just fine with me.
And like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
I'm State Farm agent Jeff Libby. One of the most gratifying parts of my job is helping young parents, people who are just beginning to understand what life insurance is all about. Young couples don't need a sales talk. They just need to talk to someone who understands them and their life insurance needs. Now, I know what that promise of security means, and I don't believe there's a better promise a parent can make.
State Farm sells life insurance.
You know, an amazing thing, Granddad was very, very successful with the Wild West show. At times he made all kinds of money. At the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, he made over $3 million.
Buffalo Bill and his partner Nate Salisbury knew that the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago was going to be one of the great World's Fairs, one of the great aggregations of people, and decided to take advantage of it. Salisbury moved quickly and secured a corner near the main gate of the White City, as the World's Fair was called. Built a grandstand to seat 20,000 people, and he and Buffalo Bill were in business. They filled the grandstand twice a day for the entire summer, and it's said, although there are no income tax records, of course, to check, that Cody and Salisbury each netted $1 million from that summer's work. Cody also put together for that year something that made it perhaps even more spectacular than it would have been otherwise. He added a feature that would stay with the show until the end, the Congress of Rough Riders of the World, he called it, with representatives of, as they said in those days, all races and nations in the saddle. So it was a chance for people to compare horsemen from around the world. And in fact, that was appropriate since there were people from around the world who were in Chicago that summer taking in the fair.
But yet, on the other hand, there were times when he was in financial straits.
Buffalo Bill is not given much credit for being a good businessman. He's also not generally regarded as a reflective person. Both of those statements remind me, in fact, of a discussion of Cody by his one-time partner, Pawnee Bill, who said that Buffalo Bill always struck him in their times together as being somewhat childlike. Childlike in a couple of ways. One of those is in his faith in other people. He was what we might call a sucker for a good story and was always an easy touch for a handout. But he was also someone who believed that business deals were struck with a handshake, and who expected other people to keep their promises in the same way that he expected to keep his own promises. Another way in which Cody was childlike, at least as Pawnee Bill told it, was in his approach to economic development. Pawnee Bill said that Cody told him that the reason he kept sinking his money into gold mines in Arizona and Wyoming was because he thought that gold had to be the cleanest kind of money there was, that it didn't rely on the exploitation of a lot of people, that all you had to do was carry the gold up out of the ground and cash it at the assayer's office or at the bank, and it would be an easy way to support all those retainers and workers and relatives and all the others who depended on Buffalo Bill for income, and keep his ranches in operation and allow him to retire to the mountains out around Cody, Wyoming, that he loved so much. So in that sense, he was childlike and maybe a little unbusinesslike in his approach to spreading his money around.
He took the $3 million, came out the west here, invested in gold mines, drilling of oil wells, building the Irma Hotel, building the TE ranch and the ranches. He was instrumental in bringing all the reclamation into this part of Wyoming. I think that's one of the most overlooked phases of his life. He was truly a builder of the West.
When Cody started making investments in this new town of Cody, this new town, his namesake, one of the first and most important things he decided to put his money into was a hotel. In those days, Cody was nothing much more than a couple of dirt streets that crossed where 12th Street, or the main downtown part of Cody, is now, a few wooden shacks, and some promise. And Cody put about $80,000 into erecting a fairly grandiose, for the time, sandstone building that he called the Irma after his youngest daughter. Building a hotel like that in a place like Cody seems to me the equivalent in a modern city perhaps of putting up a domed stadium. It's as much an emblem of civic pride without regard to profit or economic return as it is a matter of business. It was Cody's way of saying this town is here to stay, and in fact the Irma Hotel still anchors downtown.
At the height of his career, Colonel Cody entertained lavishly. His hunting lodge, the Pahaska Teepee, became a rustic refuge of princes and presidents. Bill, this is a significant spot in your heart, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. You know, Dan, Granddad first came over into this area in 1892, came over the Bighorn Mountains from Sheridan, and he selected this location as a place for a hunting lodge. And that's what it was from the very beginning. And then as the tourists started going through the east gate of Yellowstone, it was 1913 when the first automobile went through the east gate here. Prior to that time, why, it was stagecoach and wagons. So it became, in the summertime, kind of an overnight stop for the tourists that were going into Yellowstone. Now, the lodge itself is very, very much like it was in when it was originally built. The main difference as I look around is electric lights. Of course, they didn't have that when the lodge was built, surely, but it was built along in about 1901, 1902, about the same time as the Irma Hotel was built down in Cody.
Bill, what does Pahaska mean?
Well, that was Granddad's Indian name, Pahaska. Pahaska means long hair in Indian. So when Granddad built the lodge here, he called it Pahaska Teepee. Well, this place was rather unique. Of course, Granddad loved the TE ranch. That's where he liked to go and get away from everything. And he didn't use that as a guest place. Pahaska was the favorite place to bring his guests, like the Prince of Monaco and the Indians and Teddy Roosevelt, a lot of the other dignitaries that he wanted to entertain and bring into this country and help develop it. Of course, he brought Teddy Roosevelt up here, and it was on that trip where Granddad showed Teddy Roosevelt the location that he'd like to have the U.S. government build a dam. And the dam is now called the Buffalo Bill Dam. It was built, well, it was finished along about 1908. and at the time it was the tallest dam in the world. There were very, very few people in the entire area, and Congress just didn't want to spend all that money out into an area where there weren't any people. Well, of course, which came first, the dam or the people? As soon as they got the dam in, got the irrigation, why, Granddad and others were successful in getting a lot of homesteaders to come in the area and build and develop it to a point which we have today.
Due to Colonel Cody's persistent campaigning, opposition was defeated and the road to Yellowstone became a reality. President Theodore Roosevelt reportedly told Congress, "I would take chances on building a road into the middle of eternity on his statement." Largely due to Buffalo Bill's tireless promotion of the area, millions of people enjoy Yellowstone National Park each year. His efforts were recognized in the early 1930s at the dedication of Cody Peak.
I remember I was just graduated from high school and I was asked to dedicate that peak to Granddad. And I can still remember some of the things that I said. It was on Pathé News. I said, "We are here today to further commemorate the memory of Colonel William F. Buffalo Bill Cody by dedicating this beautiful peak to his memory."
Bill, that was how many years ago?
Oh, goodness, that was 1932.
You have a tremendous memory.
I grew up on a farm just down the road. I know.
With the death of James A. Bailey, Cody found himself in 1907 and 1908 without a partner for the first time. At least the first time since he'd managed his stage plays back in the 1870s. And he found he needed one. He found that for someone of his age, it wasn't as easy to pull all the strings that needed to be pulled to make a Wild West show work. So he found kind of an unlikely partnership with Pawnee Bill Lilly, a banker and stockman from Oklahoma who actually had been in the very first Wild West show back in 1883 as an interpreter for the Pawnee Indians. He and Pawnee Bill struck a deal, and they toured together then fairly happily for the next 4 years till their show was bankrupted in 1913 in Denver. The bankruptcy was a result of the machinations of one of the owners of the Denver Post, a man named Harry Tammon, who through some underhanded contracts and through the buying of a note from one of the Buffalo Bill's show lithographers, managed to arrange for the show to be closed in Denver by sheriffs and put up to auction in July during its visit to the Mile High City. And Tammon thereafter seemed to own a piece of Buffalo Bill. Tammon put together his own circus the next year. He called it the Sells Floto Circus for no good reasons, really, except that Sells was a good old circus name, and there was a man in the sports department of the Denver Post named Floto, and he put Buffalo Bill up as the star attraction, Buffalo Bill himself in the Sells Floto Circus. It was not a happy association, and as soon as he could get out of his contract with Tammon, Cody did so. But during those 4 years that Cody and Lilly were together, their show was known affectionately as the Two Bills Show. With some of the Denver Post money and some of his own and his friends' money, Cody put together the Historical Motion Pictures Company to make principally a film about the Indian Wars, to bring all of the old soldiers together with all of the Indians who had campaigned on the plains, and to make an epic documentary or at least a dramatic film, but with a great deal of historical accuracy and historical currency. It showed mostly the Indian battles that Cody himself had been involved in, but it also tackled Wounded Knee, the most recent and one of the bloodiest of all of the confrontations between the Army and the Indian. In doing so, the film itself became a 5-reeler. It was a big, heavy documentary-style epic. And it involved the cooperation of the War Department under the direction of General Miles himself. And it used a bunch of the old soldiers who had participated in the Indian campaigns to portray themselves, as well as a number of Indian people who had been involved in battles as far back as Little Bighorn. It must have been really something, and it would be nice to find a surviving copy, nice for historical reasons, and nice for perhaps even ethnographic reasons. The show was so faithful in its depiction of Wounded Knee that there are some historians who believe that it was later suppressed by the War Department, that all of the copies were hidden or destroyed, and that none remains. Well, there is a very little bit that remains. It seems more likely, given that the show was fairly widely distributed and was shown in several cities, from Massachusetts to California. It seems more likely that it died of its own weight. It was an epic documentary, in a sense, and probably was not the sort of fare that the movie-going public was looking for. It was graphic in its depictions of violence and death. It was not at all cosmetic in its treatment of Wounded Knee, and it probably did not develop a very popular following. I suspect that the show simply went bust. There were actually really three things that made Buffalo Bill decide to go into the making of movies. First, he had a love of technology. He was a forward-looking man. He didn't look back nostalgically. He reveled in technologies. He'd formed an acquaintance with Thomas Edison in 1889 when the Wild West show was one of the technological marvels of its age for its use of electricity and modern firefighting and cooking equipment. He had visited Edison at his studios to record messages on Edison's cylinders, and he became acquainted with movie technology very early. In fact, for a time, the Wild West sideshow included a tent where what was called mythoplasm, or motion pictures, were shown. So he was ready for movies when the movies were ready for him. Another factor was the decline of the Wild West show as a popular form of outdoor show business. With the ending of the frontier, with modern warfare as exemplified in the Spanish-American War, with the coming of the First World War in Europe, the Wild West seemed outdated somehow, and people stopped appreciating it as much as they had earlier. He was ready then to give it up, to move to movies, with the added benefit from his point of view of not having to face the possible embarrassment of dying in the arena. A third factor was his desire to make a permanent record of those Western events before all of those people who had participated were gone. Cody wasn't so much interested in the details of history or historical reproduction, things like the correct horse equipment or the correct military uniforms, but he was interested in getting the real participants on film. So in his filming of that epic movie, The Indian Wars, in which were recreated the Battle of Warbonnet Creek and the Battle of Summit Springs and the Battle of Wounded Knee, among others, he insisted on authenticity to the extent of having the real Indians who had participated and the real cavalry officers, at least, and many of the men who had participated in those battles. He was interested in getting the story straight, not necessarily getting the details right.
It is hard to believe the man who had the respect and friendship of kings and presidents was born in this humble farmhouse in LeClaire, Iowa, and had started out on the frontier as an 11-year-old teamster's helper to support a widowed invalid mother and 5 children. Here in a rare laboratory recording, we hear Colonel Cody praise the achievements of his innovative friend, Thomas Edison.
It is a great pleasure to see this wonder-working man at his task and to find that though he is Superman to all the world, he is very human at home and among those who labor with him. He has made the dynamo that has changed the world. It seems almost uncanny that the voice in this place can be perpetuated, and that he has sent out to the world his phonographs, which have given more entertainment and pleasure than any invention in the history of the world.
The boy with barely 6 weeks' formal education had become an eloquent speaker, traveling in the circle of the 19th century power elite. In the weeks to come, we will step back in time at Living History Farms, Des Moines, Iowa, and chat with the general storekeepers and the town doctor, and witness the evolution of farm life from pioneer times to the present. We will venture to the Old West, where the series will take you to abandoned gold mines and try our hand at panning for the elusive metal which drove so many to despair. We will visit the most significant military sites along the famous Oregon Trail for a glimpse of the everyday life of the people stationed there and the exploits of pioneers passing by on their way west. We will take you behind the bars of the frontier prisons to discover their role in the taming of the West and spend several enjoyable hours with our old friend Bill Cody for a personal glimpse of his world-famous grandfather, Colonel William F. Buffalo Bill Cody. Other episodes include a look at frontier entertainment featuring a performance at the restored Atlas Theater in Cheyenne, Wyoming, a visit to the Wind River Reservation for a look at the blending of Native American culture and European religion at their Episcopal mission, and a talk with mountain men for an inside view of the Rocky Mountain fur trade and its influence on the exploration of the West. We thank you for allowing us to introduce our series, and we invite you to watch as we bring the living history of Americana on tour into the homes of America. The success of our program depends on you, the home viewer. If you have comments or questions about our program, please write me in care of Americana on Tour, Congerville, Illinois, 61729. We'll see you next week. Below us lies perhaps the finest monument to the entrepreneurial genius of Buffalo Bill. The city of Cody, Wyoming, which began as a spark in the imagination of Colonel Cody, has developed into a thriving city and a repository for Western culture.
Back in the 1920s, the Cody Family Association and many of the local people here in the Cody country formed the Buffalo Bill Memorial Association. And they constructed a little log building across the street here, which was the original Buffalo Bill Museum. Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney became the main benefactor. She sculptured the statue of Granddad the Scout and donated this 40 acres that the Buffalo Bill Historical Center is now built on. She dedicated this land for the sole purpose of commemorating the memory of Buffalo Bill. And since that time, by the directors of the Buffalo Bill Historical Center have been able to put together 3 other museums to complement the Buffalo Bill Museum into this complex, namely the Whitney Gallery of Western Arts, the Indians Museum, and the Cody Gun Collection. And it's turned out to be, by far, the Smithsonian of the West.
Today we sit in a structure that's 210,000 square feet, operating in an annual budget of about $4 million and a staff of well over 125 people, running a museum of national and international stature in a town of 8,000 people in the northwest corner of the least populated state in the Union, Wyoming.
This majestic view on Cedar Mountain was one of Colonel Cody's favorites. In fact, once he chose this mountain as his final resting place. But after his sudden death in Denver, Colorado, he was laid to rest at a similar site atop Lookout Mountain. I'd like to thank Bill Cody and our many friends in Cody, Wyoming that we made along the way for taking care of us and their hospitality.
and for making this portion of our program a success. We'll see you next week, folks.
Thank you.